Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever, whenever that you may be tuning in here. This is Yonks with Gigs Go Green, and super excited. We're actually kicking off a new working group series, Community Solar for Churches. And it's a long story how that we got to here, but we've got several other people that we are joined with. And this is something that's a little different that we're doing. Instead of using Notion, we're still using Notion behind the scenes, but kind of transitioned over to using Google Docs. And I'll share this link for the people on the Zoom as well, so that you can follow along. And if you need me to add you as an editor, you can view and comment. But if you want to edit, request access and I'll get you added. But anyway, scrolling down to our agenda here, as I mentioned, this is our first working group, and I want to do a real quick intro. Hey, everybody, Jason Yonker, but you can call me Yonks. And Gigs Go Green is a movement for gig workers. And one of the things that's relevant for gig workers and we're thinking primarily Uber and Lyft drivers here for gig workers, is that these gig workers need a place to refuel their vehicle. And as we transition to sustainable and renewable energy through electric vehicles, the need and demand for us to have sustainable and renewable energy infrastructure is very, very strong. And we're building two models, a parking lot model, and imagine upgrading a parking lot that includes a parking lot solar canopy, battery storage, and then EV charging. And those are the three components that we're incorporating into our solar EV model. But anyway, that's what we're doing. And we've been leading this effort, myself, Amy, and Tyler. We've been refining this narrative since probably middle of last year, but we've been collectively building win-win-win projects since the middle of 21. And on that note, Tyler, I'll kick it over to you and then you can kick it to the next person.
Uh, hey everybody, I'm Tyler Yonker. I am Mrs. Yonks, and I've been with this project since it was retoken at the very beginning, and just really excited that we can help churches create new sources of revenue, new sources of community outreach, and just solve a problem in the community. I think um, churches are really committed to solving people's spiritual problems, maybe not always solving their actual problems. So this is a really fun and interesting way to do that.
And are you able to do an intro for us, Amy?
Yes. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. My name is Amy. I've been with the team since its inception in June, July of was it 22 or 21?
2021.
2021. But anyway, we have evolved since then and really excited to include the churches and its initiative in sustainability. I have been a volunteer of St. Vincent de Paul for uh, more than 8 years with the soup kitchen and the food pantry. And I also have sustainability projects in solar and green hydrogen. So this is something that is really exciting for me to dive into. And looking forward to seeing you all. You uh, join our team. We'll be happy to have you on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And over to you, Ashley, the newest member of our team that we met through the community-owned real estate academy that the Center for Community Wealth Building here, hosted by Paul Bindle, a very strong steward of cooperative organizations in the Front Range of Colorado here. So over to you, Ashley.
Hi there, I'm Ashley Burns and excited to be a part of this vision. Um, I really believe in being the change you want to see in the world. And that's a statement I live by. And I try to choose to put my actions and energies towards things that support that. And ultimately, we as stewards of the earth, and a faith community should be leading by example and leading the way in ways to think outside the box. I really have always been a big belief coming together to think of something bigger and greater that can so many possibilities. And I'm excited to bring my background in nonprofits, as I have a master's in arts and cultural nonprofit, and my faith and my community as a Broomfield United Methodist community member, and am honored to be a part of a church that really puts their ideas into action, and hoping to be a liaison to my church and the Creation Care Committee, as well as the initiative to address other issues regarding the homelessness and housing crisis. And that's a bigger picture, but excited to see how all of us coming together with our resources, talents, and abilities can create something great. So looking forward to being part of the team.
Thanks, Ashley. And that's a great segue into Scott, who also attends Broomfield UMC. And Tyler and I participated in the Mountain Sky Conference Greening Your Church conversation via Zoom that I believe there was like 50 to 60 plus participants on Sunday afternoon. So over to you, Scott.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I have to say, I just got this email and decided to jump on. I'm not familiar with the program at all, but anything having to do with EV and solar, I'm all in. I'm a new member at Broomfield UMC, been there about a year. I'm helping a couple areas. I am working with Cody and also Jody on us finding energy efficient measures for the structure. I'm actually a building scientist for many years ago. So I'm trying to help with that to identify, those key things. I also own a small solar consulting company, so primarily helping homeowners. So we do solar design, get the financing, work with a couple installers in a few states. So I'm involved with that. And then finally, trying to help do some community organizing with churches in the Broomfield area to work around issues such as housing, the environment. We're still working on that issue development. So yeah, I'm just here to kind of learn more and see if there's a way I can help what you guys have been doing. And Amelia, love to hear that you're volunteer at St. Vincent de Paul Society. I actually studied with the Vincentians many, many years ago in theology. And so I've got a real soft spot, and St. Vincent de Paul and all the work that you guys do. So thanks for you volunteering.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for the introduction. So getting back to our agenda, let's go ahead and cross these items off of our list. So one of the things, and this is something that I was briefly discussing before we hopped on to the live stream here, is that this is the Hero X. And let me go to the main project page. So the three of us, myself, Tyler, and Amy, we have a pretty long history. And just taking a look at my profile here, user profile. So we submitted submissions. We recently submitted Gigs Go Green, and this kind of just unpacks the evolution. We submitted earlier in Q3, September, October, solar EV. And then the narrative for solar EV elevated to Gigs Go Green. And then prior to that, in 2021, we submitted several Hero X prizes for Token Town, the HOA Destroyer. So this is something that we personally have a long history of utilizing. And just looking at the summary here of this, let me make this a little bit bigger here for everybody. So Solve It is an acronym, and we all know how much the government loves their acronym alphabet soup. So Solve It stands for the Solutions for Lasting Viable Energy Infrastructure Technologies. Prize aims to empower communities to identify and implement innovative clean energy solutions in a way that works for their unique needs and challenges. And I'm not going to unpack what Gigs Go Green is here, but it's basically 3 synergistic cooperatives for the primary benefit of gig workers. And again, that specific niche of gig workers that we're talking about are Uber and Lyft drivers. And I don't know, probably most of us in 2024, at least once in our life, have taken Uber and Lyft. And Uber and Lyft, in my opinion, is really getting interwoven into our society here in the United States for a public good as far as transporting people. And this is something that I've personally provided since 2016, over 12,000 trips, a good majority of those here in the Denver area. So we're wanting to create, talking about community solar for churches. What we're proposing is upgrading parking lots and churches. And we've through our prior working groups conversations, we've targeted different parking lots that would make sense for this model. And community solar for churches are the niche that we're specifically focusing on here in early 2024 to move this forward. And this really goes back to a core foundation that I have as far as like, there's really 2 buckets of people. And one of the things that we're doing as far as the way that we're going to be capitalizing these infrastructure projects is through regulation crowdfunding, which allows the community to invest in these synergistic cooperatives that we're creating. So right now, I really believe that it's a no-brainer for us to refine the narrative that we've already to put a perspective on things. We literally just did a Hero X submission for a different prize. And let me go back over here real quick to my profile. So we just did this one for the Community Energy Innovation Prize for Gigs Go Green. So here was our team submission for that. And I'm not going to unpack the details of that. That's something that we might get into. So one of the things, and I'll come back to this, but I really think that this is, again, a no-brainer. Does anybody have any thoughts, feedback, questions on the Hero X Solve It before we move down the agenda list? Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, if you could just offer kind of an overview, and I do apologize, I literally just jumped on this thing. So,
No,
what's the big picture? Are you seeking communities of faith to work with the project, to offer our parking lot, to provide a EV station? What's the ask? What's the big picture? So I can kind of follow what you're going through in terms of all the details.
Absolutely. And to be clear, the community solar for churches is just one niche that we're looking at here. And let me actually go to, so here's the Notion page. This is at, if you go to churches, and I'll put this on the Zoom here, gigsgogreen.org. So this is our Notion database that we use here. So this is a list of churches that we have prioritized. Now, to be clear, the community solar for churches doesn't necessarily fall into our narrative. This is just, again, one slice of a go-to-market strategy for Gigs Go Green that we're specifically focusing on. And one of the things that this is a little bit relevant, and let me rewind here a little bit. So we work off of a working group series. This is the first functional conversation that we're specifically talking about community solar for faith-based organizations, and I'm just going to call this churches here. So now, whether it makes sense, it probably doesn't, especially with the timeline to break out the conversation. And this is something that we may do. And this is just something to think about, like when you're thinking about homework or takeaways. Because the other thing too is like Kickstarter crowdfunding is a core component of our go-to-market strategy. But when you're talking about getting a submission for Hero X, that's slightly different than the conversations around community solar for churches. So that's just kind of like some of the potential working groups that we're looking to host here in March and April in this Google Docs as far as the working group series. So to bring it back to the conversation and to answer your question, Scott, let me go to Notion again, and let me do a search here for solar EV. And one of the reasons that we are doing solar EV as far as a branding strategy, solar EV is a better, because like community solar, and this is something when I was having the conversation with Jay Vestal yesterday, and this even came up today when Tyler was out and about. She saw a sign talking about community solar, and there's some community solar that are basically doing group purchasing power for homeowners so that they can leverage organizational, institutional buying capacity. But I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as community solar as defined by like the State Public Utility Commission. So anyway, like looking here as far as like site selection, and let's look at, so looking at some, let me make this a little bit bigger. So site niches.
Jason, if I could ask this, because when you say community solar, I'm not exactly sure I understand how you're defining it. Typically, if you have a neighborhood, you have a community solar array, and you all share the power. Or are you looking at individual churches having a station to serve the whole community? So what do you mean by community solar with your model?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's really two models, and again, think of it through the lens of a gig worker, because we're creating these 3 synergistic cooperatives for the primary benefit of gig workers. And right now we're specifically talking about solar EV, which is where we're wanting to create renewable, sustainable energy infrastructure, again, for the primary benefit of Uber and Lyft drivers that are driving electric vehicles. And when you're thinking about a gig worker that's doing an 8 to 12 plus hour shift, transporting our community members around from point A to point Z, there's really 2 ways that they need to charge. Like in the middle of their day, electric vehicles don't have enough charge. It's very easy for a gig worker to drive 300 to 400 miles or more in a day to support. And like our Tesla Model Y at 80, 90% gets around 240, 250, and you don't really want to, so think 220, 200-ish. So either way, in the middle of the day, the driver is going to be getting hungry, and they're going to need to stop to grab a bite to eat. And then the opportunity, while they're getting a bite to eat, refuel their car so that they can have a full tank of charge. That's where a parking lot model with DC fast charging comes into play. And there's really 3 components, and it doesn't matter whether it's a parking lot model or a single family house. 3 components: solar for generating the energy, battery storage, and EV charging. So that this allows us, and what the industry calls is a distributed energy resource. And this is even better than most distributed energy resources, because this has a distribution model, the EV charging. And the thing about EV charging, due to economics that exist today, EV charging is the most expensive retail electricity that's provided via the utility grid. And when you think about this distributed energy resource that we're generating, storing, and distributing, that could potentially alleviate any transmission using the public utility grid at all, because we're generating the energy there and distributing it on site. So, and then same thing, Scott, for like when you fast forward a gig worker after they put in their 10 or 12 hours that day, the last thing that they want to do is go sit in a parking lot for another half an hour, 45 minutes. They want to go home, plug their car in, kick back a cold one, binge some Netflix, whatever, and then have a full tank of charge the next day. So those are really the 2 models that we're looking at. And through the process in prior working groups, we really worked through some of the places in our local communities, and there's an unlimited amount of parking lots when you think about like the Front Range, the Denver area here, one of which RTD. RTD has an immense amount of parking lots for park and ride that are sitting vacant. And one of the things, again, we're focusing right now on community solar for churches because we really view churches as parking lots that are mostly sitting idle a good majority of the time. And when you think about like through the lens of a business or a church, for most businesses, and there's some exceptions. One of the exceptions in the Front Range that I'm very aware of that is on our list is Riverside Church, right there up the way from Mile High Stadium where the Broncos play. That parking lot that they have is a profit center for that church, but that's a rare situation for parking lots across the metro area. Most organizations, a parking lot is in the expense category. When you look at a church's annual budget, they have an annual operating expense to maintain their parking lot. And what we're proposing here is to upgrade the parking lot, turn that expense into a community-owned asset that generates energy for the benefit of the community at large. So does that answer your question, Scott?
Yeah, and it's interesting timing. And again, I do apologize since I have no history of this, but this is exciting. We currently have solar, and we're exploring adding some panels right now. We have not discussed battery storage yet, but this is good timing. So I'm assuming that part of your outreach is to identify parking lots. So for me and Ashley, is this a way that we can help? Is this the ask? Because this, to me, is a possibility because our pastor is actually exploring trying to find some money to help pay for the solar. So kind of get me up on board, up to speed on why I could be of help here.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did here is we've compiled a list, and let me go back because it's a little bit cleaner on that other page, the Community Solar for Churches page. So one of the things, and let me open up this tool because this is a great tool that we have used. I actually have an account created for Gigs Go Green. This is on ever.green, and one of the things that makes this so viable, this model, and this parking lot model, we're putting a swag of a capital expense of 5 to 15 million. And the way that we're going to be building this project is we're going to be co-developing it with churches, because like the big value proposition here isn't one church operating as a solo operator, because this is we're all participating in the electrical grid. And one of the things that I believe is really the secret sauce isn't even necessarily the solar, it's the battery storage and the EV charging. And do you currently own an EV, Scott?
I do not. I just have a hybrid, so I don't have obviously I help homeowners put in EV chargers in garages and that sort of thing, but I do not have an EV.
Gotcha. So, and this is one of the things, as an EV owner, you get a lot better perspective of the energy economics. And just to put some numbers behind things, I'm not exactly sure what we pay Xcel Energy per kilowatt here at home. We don't have solar at our house here in North Glen yet. Not even going to unpack why that is. But the big opportunity with this model is the battery storage and the EV charging, because like the opportunity to buy power from Xcel at whatever rate that we get with Xcel, if we're not able to generate enough solar energy. But with the EV charging, you normally are, with DC fast, you're normally charging anywhere from 30 to 45 cents a kilowatt hour. So the opportunity to charge a premium over what we get. And then when you unpack the investment tax credits, and this is one of the things that the Inflation Reduction Act that the Biden administration signed into effect in 2022, the transferability of these investment tax credits are what makes this so viable. Because like looking through this list that I compiled here, Depending on how you stack these energy incentives, you can potentially have a tax credit up to 70% of the capital spend. And we're putting 5 to 15 million, just to like put a specific number. A Tesla Megapack, institutional grade battery storage, which provides 3 megawatts of battery storage, that installed is a $2 million cost. So we think that the 5 to 15 million is pretty accurate. So just to round it off at 70% of 10 million, that would be 7 million. And the thing about these investment tax credits is that for the first time in the history of energy tax credits, these are actually transferable. So for a startup or for a nonprofit organization, and this asset would actually be its own business, that I'm not even going to unpack that, but there would be a special purpose vehicle that would be created basically for the energy resources. So for example, I understand that within conferencing that happens within UMC, that the conference owns the real estate of the churches. So for example, this energy asset that we create, the solar, the battery storage, the EV charging, that could be a new entity that could be community owned. And then that entity would have a lease agreement, long-term lease agreement to like the Mountain Sky Conference for that particular thing. So this is one of the things that's really exciting with using on-chain technology, the opportunity to really create meaningful benefits. And then like the way that I understand solar economics here in 2024 is that the numbers are so good that we can, even factoring outside the EV charging, where we're able to charge a premium for the energy consumed at the pump, if you will. Also, we have the opportunity to onboard low and moderate income households. And we actually, in order to stack some of these tax incentives, and let me look at this bonus chart here. So I have on this list Broomfield United Methodist Church, since we've got a couple people on the call here today. So Broomfield United Methodist Church, if you stack the domestic content and shared benefits, the shared benefits are where you have to provide meaningful benefits to like low and moderate income households, for example. We can, oh, that's the golf course. It has a base tax credit of 30%. So like the way that I summarize that here, it's not in a Justice 40 and it's not in an energy community. So, but it's still, if we stack the domestic content, still can provide up to 60% of the investment tax credits. And this evergreen market is actually a marketplace that this website is creating, where these investment tax credits can be sold to buyers. And from what I understand, they normally sell for 92 to 96 cents on the dollar. So losing track of thought there. So did that answer the question that was put forward? And yes, most of the reasons that these locations made the list here is because of their proximity. Let me actually go to this is the Google Docs that we're working with Sean from Illume Consulting. We have a follow-up conversation with Sean, and he's really helping to architect a go-to-market strategy for moving this forward. And one of the reasons that most of these or all of these, and you can see Charge Ahead Colorado, this provides a $250,000 grant for DC fast charging infrastructure that has close proximity to these NEVI alternative fuel corridors that's been designated by the Department of Transportation. So these are the interstates in the US highways here in Colorado. So all of these churches that I put on this top 10 list have geographic proximity to, a highway that the US Department of Energy has designated as an alternative fuel corridor. So again, the goal is to stack the most tax incentives possible, because the better that we stack the tax incentives, the better that that provides return to the investors. And that's really like one of the things that I haven't really talked about as a part of our go-to-market strategy. One of the things that we're really wanting to create is the opportunity for people, the community at large, to be able to invest into this infrastructure. Because like one of the things that really became apparent to me at the height of the pandemic, when I was in lots of conversations with various different niches and circles and stuff like that, when I was in conversations with Christian leaders, I asked a question. I was like, as somebody that's been blessed financially, how can I be a good steward of my financial blessings and invest in Christ-centered businesses? And that's one of the things that I really became convicted as a social entrepreneur, is to create more opportunities. Because like one of the things that churches do well is, and this is one of the things that Tyler highlighted, is that they provide great mechanisms for spiritual connection, but they don't a lot of times provide solid mechanisms for us to become better stewards of our money. And it's not just a lack of the church, it's just us, businesses, entrepreneurs. The American culture as it exists today hasn't been Christ-centered enough to say, hey, we want to build a Christ-centered business. And one of the ways that I believe that we can build Christ-centered businesses is by focusing on onboarding Christ-centered investors into the opportunities. Because one of the things that we're going to be very intentional about creating is a governance framework, so that we really get buy-in from the people that we're serving, the community at large that we're serving. And I'm not even going to unpack that any more than just kind of laying that as a foundation. Go ahead, Scott.
With regards to the money flow, are you proposing that the Mountain Sky Conference would be the entity that comes on board with this operation and then they lease the actual parking lots, or are you trying to work directly with the individual churches? The reason I'm asking that is because the federal tax credit, at least on the residential side, is not refundable. So if you're not paying taxes, you can't take advantage of the tax credit. There are tax equity firms. I think you kind of referenced that maybe we can get that. How does the money flow? And do we, as Broomfield United Methodist Church, begin to work with your operation? Or are we just saying, hey, we're interested, keep us in the loop while you work with Mountain Sky Conference?
No, this is something that I want to be stewarded at a hyper local level. So the way that I understand the Mountain Sky Conference is that the committee, the board of trustees, would have to be on board with the direction.
Okay, but you would work directly with Broomfield UMC or Riverside.
Absolutely, and this is something that we are really wanting to co-develop with the church hyper-locally. Because when you think about what we're talking about here, energy is one of the most regulated industries that exists. And when we're talking about getting key stakeholders, it's not just Broomfield United Methodist Church that we would have to get some buy-in for. We would also have Broomfield, the city of Broomfield, and then Broomfield, the county of Broomfield. And then we really need to get the interconnection with Excel, the utility grid. And this is one of the things that we're like, this isn't something that we're not solar developers. So like, we also want to work with a solar developer. And like, when you unpack what we're doing here, like solar developers may not have battery expertise. And this is one of the things that, like, when we've had conversations with the Clean Energy Office of Colorado, when we were asking about these three components, the solar, like parking lot canopy, battery storage, and DC fast charging, there wasn't any, like, the Clean Energy Office of Colorado wasn't aware of a single instance of this model that exists within the entire state. So this is something that we're really, and one of the things that's worth mentioning here, Scott, the way that we're architecting
Sort of
this,
lost me there, Jason. So you're saying they're not aware of a solar system and then battery storage and then EV charging? I mean, this is done every day.
it's those three components in tandem aren't done at all. So and specifically DC fast charging. And as somebody that's been, I mean, like on our 2021 Tesla Model Y, we've almost got 100,000 miles, and I've charged a lot around the metro area, Tesla superchargers, charge point, and there's not, that I'm aware of, nor is the Clean Energy Office of Colorado aware of these three components synergistically installed anywhere in Colorado.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that just has to do with like, it's more complex, because like when you talk about there's going to be construction involved and disruption, because like when you think about just installing an EV charger, it's a little different than when you're talking about building an entire parking lot canopy for a parking lot versus just like putting in a battery storage, if that exists. So I absolutely know that there's like a lot. I think most of the Tesla superchargers probably have a battery component, and I don't even know what that looks like, because I don't know how much the Tesla publicly shares that information. So, and this is something that we're like I said, we're really looking to, because we really believe that this is kind of a no-brainer model, because like regardless of whether you have an electric vehicle or not, whenever you're riding up to a parking lot as a driver, if you have the choice of parking under a covered parking lot, cost aside, if it's the same cost, every single time somebody will park under covered parking versus uncovered parking, you avoid the elements, and it's just, you know, a better situation for protecting your car when you're in a parking lot.
I think this will help me a lot, and I promise I won't ask another question. In terms of scale, because that might help me understand what size of system are we looking at? I mean, and that gives me, and are we able to use existing roof systems on buildings of churches? Will that possibly provide enough space? What system size are we talking about? 10 kilowatt, 20, 30, 40? Give me some kind of a scale so I can wrap my head around what an individual church will need to do.
The solar, in my opinion, the ability for us to generate energy on site is just gravy in this model, because the economics are, with the tax credits and the fact that we're doing EV charging, are so good. And then also, the size of the solar installation, in my opinion, is trivial. Whether it's a 1 kilowatt or 5 kilowatt or even less than 1 kilowatt, the secret sauce here, Scott, is the battery storage and the EV charging, and that's really where we add resiliency to the grid as well.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, yeah, I got it. I have a better understanding now. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that with this Gigs Go Green model that we're really looking to bring retail consumers in the form of gig workers, because like one of the things that we're going to be doing for members, and we're structuring this more as the three entities that we're creating for Colorado. And I don't think that I mentioned it, but one of the things that we're doing from a model architecture is that we're architecting this model with the intent of it being replicated on a state-by-state basis. So like 2 states that make sense for us that we're already having thoughts about for expanding this Gigs Go Green model in 2025 and beyond are New York and Minnesota. And the reasons for those 2 states is those 2 states have very favorable community solar regulations. And the way that I understand the community solar regulations is that it allows us to onboard subscribers, retail energy subscribers, on the other end, like people that live in an apartment that consume energy, they can be a community solar subscriber. Like, let's say that we collectively call this community solar for Christ. For Christ is something that we're building into this ecosystem And I'm not even going to unpack that any more than what I just did there. But let's say that we call this Community Solar for Christ, the opportunity for us to onboard apartment dwellers and have their energy come from Community Solar for Christ and then get transmitted by Excel. Excel does the billing. They'll technically be a Community Solar for Christ energy subscriber in our Community Solar model. And we can provide benefits like, let's say it for low and moderate income, 80%. So they would basically get a 20% reduced premium for what they would normally pay to Excel. I understand, like, if we can onboard subscribers in that model, we basically can get the project financed entirely without having to have any money out of pocket. Now, that's one of the avenues that we're going to explore. But the other thing that we're also going to be exploring is that we really want to create these energy assets to be community owned and operated, community owned by, the members of the local community, whether it's members of Broomfield United Methodist Church or members of Gigs Go Green that are retail subscribers or energy consumers from an EV charging standpoint. That's the opportunity that we're building here. So we only have 5 minutes left. I think that we've done a good job. One of the things that I want to talk about here, and this is something that we want to get better at, is I think that there's a strong opportunity to create a blog post, top 10 churches in 2024 for community solar in Colorado. And this is one of the things that would be easy to create some content. We've already got our top 10 list. So one of the things that I would say is a homework. This top 10 list isn't something that's set in stone. And this is something that we can go through. We can add, like when I was having the conversation with Jay yesterday, he was saying that Ben David Hensley, the minister at Lakewood United Methodist Church, has already been approached by somebody. I don't know who that is because I haven't had that conversation, with installing DC fast charging at Lakewood. So this is one of the things. And after the conversation yesterday with Jay, I added Lakewood to the church, and that made it the 10th church on this list. And this is something that we can, again, I would kind of like to get this list, like I said, finalized and in a published blog post, but it doesn't have to be static, and the opportunity to continue to refine that. But the idea around this is just to have a solid piece of content that we can circulate to really provide some backstory, what the opportunity is, so that we can have, again, a nice polished piece of content to kind of share what we're wanting to do and the direction that we're wanting to go, is the thoughts on that. So one of the things that we use, because like I mentioned here, I would really like to get some cadence going for one working group a week. And I see Ashley. Go ahead, Ashley. Don't forget, there you go.
I didn't have to interrupt. I was just wanting, here we go. I didn't want to interrupt necessarily. I was just raising my hand to when you had a moment, but that's fine. What I was going to suggest is, I think that you've clarified the reason that you chose those top 10 based on the corridor, correct? Wasn't that a big component of it, is the corridor and then the crossover of different tax credits?
Yes.
Those are the two components, right, that made up your decision making?
Every one of these churches on this list has geographic proximity where we should be able to qualify for Charge Ahead Colorado and potentially NEVI. I've already had some conversations. I think that there's a total of 3 windows in the year that you can normally apply for Charge Ahead Colorado. And that's basically $250,000 of money that Colorado is putting forward for the installation of DC fast charging. But every one of these churches have geographic proximity that should allow us to get qualified for Charge Ahead Colorado. And one of the things that is obviously worth mentioning is, we obviously, if all 10 of these churches, and 2 of these churches on this list are not within Excel Energy, and whether it makes sense. And I don't know whether they're actually Loveland Water and Power or not. Res Church may still be Excel Energy, but that's something I haven't really unpacked. But we obviously can't pipeline 10 projects. If all 10 of these churches said yes to what we're wanting to do, we don't have the resources to, and whether that would be a great problem to have, but really, I would be ecstatic if we had 3 churches that had letters of commitment to move forward with the process as far as just exploring. And this is, like I said, this is very much an iterative process that we're really looking to refine and get better at. Because one of the things that is a very real concern, we're talking about all of these tax incentives that got put forward through the Inflation Reduction Act. We're in the midst of a potential administration change, and those things could potentially unwind. I don't know if that will be the case or not, but that's always a possibility. If they don't unwind, we're on track to have these investment tax credits in place till 2032, and then they start dwindling from there. So the clock is ticking, and the nice thing about tax credits versus grant is that you don't have to jump through some hoops, and it's not who you know as far as getting that money. It's codified into the IRS, and there's only going to be increasing mechanisms to transfer those investment tax credits to big corporations that have money available to round out their tax strategy / green thing or whatever that they do to, big corporations do to pay less taxes. So what I'll do is I'll get a Let Us Meet created. That's one of the things that we went through. This time slot 1 to 2 appears to work well for everybody. And just to keep things consistent, I'm just going to make a Let Us Meet for the same days next week, Tuesday or Wednesday. And Scott, since you haven't used Let Us Meet, and if you're wanting to participate, it's a great tool so that people can provide their availability, and then it creates a heat map so that we can schedule the working group to be the most inclusive possible. And that's one of the things that I would like to get scheduled by tomorrow, because one of the things that also did is that we've got a meetup group, and this is one of the things that we want to do more of, is engage the community at large and provide more opportunities for people. Because while we've got 4 UMC churches on the list here, there's other organizations that we have, and the more that we can get people excited that are participants within the church, the more likely that these conversations will move forward and materialize. So here's the meetup that I created today, and this is part of just our content strategy and building in public with this radical transparency Zoom live stream model that we've been refining. But we're already 1 minute past. Any final thoughts before we bring this working group to a wrap here today?
Ashley and Scott, really excited to have you on board, and or if you want to be on board. It's just been really exciting to see other people have the same passion. We've been thinking that we were the only ones that were working on this, and just to see other people doing it is really exciting.
So, Tyler, thank you for saying that. I was going, due to a lot of environmental things my church was doing, I decided to bow out early and decided I didn't have time for that. But I did want to just ask Scott, the one thing that I would say, Youngson, in this vision and in your list of 10 is, I don't know how many of these churches have been presented this information and given an opportunity to even think about if they're even interested. But I would suspect that there are other churches that are already passionately inclined to prioritize their energy, times, and resources towards environmental issues, those would be the lowest hanging fruit, even if sometimes they don't fit all the other criteria that you're working for creating the top 10 list. Not that I'm trying to change your top 10 list, but as Scott has been actively involved and Judy's been actively involved and Cody's been actively involved, and getting to know the landscape of not just the Blue Sky conference, but also maybe knowing of other outside of the United Methodist churches, of other faith-based entities that have maybe shown interest in prioritizing environmental issues. That may be another lens to evaluate how you make your top 10 list. Not that your idea is bad, it's just I wonder how much easier it is to onboard a organization when they've already said we're prioritizing that, or that's a passion of ours, or we care about that. And with that in mind, I know that I know you debated whether to say faith-based organizations or churches. And I would want to just throw out the open lens of thinking about this. I participate in a Universalist church's fair trade market. And I will say that a lot of Universalist churches, as well as other organizations of faith, may be an easier lower hanging fruit, because I just know that the Universalist church movement, even in being in that church building, the things that they're doing to be eco-friendly and aware of eco, it would be easier to onboard someone who's prioritizing that mentality and that
I think we're open
mindset.
on the language. I think the biggest thing is a lot of people see FBO and don't know what it means. And a spirit church or a mosque or a synagogue or whatever, I don't think I don't know most houses of faith of any religion or any kind tend to identify as a faith-based organization. They say, I'm a church or a synagogue or a mosque or whatever. So I think churches is hopefully generic enough that somebody says, hey, we're not really a church, or we are a church, we identify as all these other things too. I mean, we're happy to talk to them. We're just really trying to build out some SEO and give people a clear vision of opting in, of saying, okay, I am part of a church. We were talking about this a little bit earlier of you're Methodist or Baptist or Catholic or whatever, you need solar. That our theological differences don't really matter in terms of the reduce energy costs and some of the green initiatives.
I 100% agree. I just think, and this is just my opinion, people will hear the word churches and think, well, I don't belong to a church, this doesn't apply to me. I think maybe faith-based organizations is a broader brushstroke than churches. I'm just thinking of this, but there is a more open entity when it comes to that. And I'm okay however you guys choose to do it. I'm just one of those people who sometimes wants to throw out food for thought about, for me, I actually prefer the faith-based organizations than I do churches, because faith can be a larger spectrum. I even like the houses of, what did you say? Something like that. Places of worship. It's just a thought in wanting to be more open to maybe somebody sees the meetup and they see the word churches and they're like, well, I don't go to a church, but they go to a synagogue, when maybe they would be, maybe the other parts of what it is, which is environment, really intrigue them. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting one to think about. I think where we were looking at this was there are hundreds, maybe thousands of churches. And we just think that's just such a broad umbrella when we're not saying you have to be, I mean, just even there were 56 people on this, just Methodist, just in this pretty small geography, just people that are available on this call was 56 people. So I thought it just seems like we're just looking for our pilot church. So anyway, if you know of somebody, and the other thing is I think it's going to be about intros. So Ashley, if you know somebody that attends I mean, for lack of a better word, like a not church, or another religion or whatever, and they want to talk to us, we would love to talk to them. So anyway, I did want to be respectful of people's time, but yeah, I think it's a good thought. It's really interesting to look at this. And Jason, I saw that you had this Google search.
Yeah, this is one of the tools that if you haven't used, trends.google.com is a very strong teller as far as what people are searching on Google for. And you can see here, people are way more searching for church or churches versus faith-based organizations. And I absolutely understand where you're coming from, your perspective, but this is also a specific strategy that we're wanting to get more people to potentially see what we're doing. And this is like something that is ever evolving, because we can, like, when you're talking about creating content or whatever, we can create a lot of different content where we can, and I like it, through a marketing lens, thinking of things as a funnel, and the bigger the funnel that we can create to expose people or bring people into the opportunity, because it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or Jesus Christ. When you're talking about adding a parking lot canopy, deploying a solar canopy, deploying battery storage and EV charging, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. People are like, hey, that makes a lot of sense. This looks like a viable solution to climate change. But anyway, I hear Brooke waking up from her nap. We're already 10 minutes past. I'll get the lettuce meat created and we'll go from here. But we'll look at reconvening about this time next Tuesday. And for those that are interested, we've got the conversation with Sean Newman. With anybody that's on the call here today is welcome to participate in that on Friday as well. So we'll take the conversations offline, and looking forward to moving the needle forward to bring about better, more sustainable solutions for energy and give us all options compared to Xcel Energy here in Colorado.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thanks for